Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and today we're going to take a look at the game I made in 72 hours this past weekend for the Ludum Dare Game Jam. This is a fun little adventure that I had working on this exciting game called The Last Primpy. Basically a game where you fly around in space, destroy rocks, travel to different areas, and you have to get your power levels up enough to get out of each area, and at the end you're carrying this little creature to a final destination along the way. It was a lot of fun to do, a lot of fun to make, and we're going to dive in and take a look at the process I went through to make this game now. So the theme was announced for the jam as Keeping It Alive, and I immediately knew I wanted to make a space game anyway, so I knew that I could get a creature that I would collect and I'd bring it through space was the basic idea that I had. So I started off with just making this very, very basic movement controls to just fly around in the game, and then you're able to do a little boost, and obviously you can twist and turn around as you go. And to start off with, you just fly through those planets, which is obviously not great. So I immediately wanted to make things a little bit better. So I added a slightly better looking ship model to the game just to make things not look so terrible. And as you can see, I've also made it so that the camera would follow a little bit nicer, so you can kind of turn around and it looks a little bit more active as you're going around in this little world. But of course, if you're going to be flying around in a spaceship, you really need the most important element, and that's some barrel rolls like we see here. I knew that we wanted to have that in as a way to kind of dodge enemy fire and things like that. And most importantly, how can you have a spaceship and not have cool barrel rolls going on? So that was obviously a very vital requirement for the game. And obviously another very simple requirement was we needed shooting. So you needed to be able to shoot things. So I created a very simple system to allow you to shoot in different directions. And the idea would be that the shots would follow wherever you fired them out from. And I wanted to have two varieties of shooting. So I wanted to have an object that would act kind of as a rocket, but also one that just acted as a laser in the game. And for those to work, I obviously needed some cursors on the screen. So I set up a simple system to, as you can see, you've got a red box that shows when you're locked onto something, which you can fire with your right click, and your left click will go wherever the white cursor is pointing on the screen, which is also what controls your rotation of the ship around as you go as well. So it was fun at this point working on this, and that was pretty much the basics in place. So I figured we should really make this start to look a little bit nicer. So I changed the background skybox to something a little bit more appropriate. There's some stars in the background you can see there. And also we added some post-processing effects. So look, there's bits of bloom. We've got some trails behind the ship to make it look like you're actually moving around a bit better. And generally just a few minor improvements to make things feel that little bit nicer in the game. I knew another element I really wanted to have in the game was the ability to switch cameras. So you can see here I've switched to the first person view of the ship. It's not really a critical thing in the final game. It's not something you have to use. It does make shooting a little bit easier, but shooting is pretty easy from the outside view as well, which is what should be the main view of the ship anyway. I never got time to make an in-ship kind of cockpit view, which was my original intention, but you only have so much time in a game jam, so it's hard to get everything in that you want. So I knew the plan was to be able to power up your ship along the way, so I added this very simple pickup system. So when you destroy something, you get some objects dropping in the world. You have to run forward and collect them. Very easy to do, very simple, but it would allow us then to go on and add the level exit system. So you can see I changed the skybox here a little bit as well. We've got this level exit system, which basically very simply you fly towards when the power level is high enough, and we disappear through the warp zone and then pop back out in the next level. Now this is just popping me back out in the exact same level, but you get the idea that that is a simple way to do that simple mechanic. And at this point everything was a little bit too easy. Obviously there's no danger going on here, so it was time to add in an enemy. So the enemy here is just using the exact same model as the our player ship is using, but he's using some red trails instead of the blue trails of the player, just to distinguish it a little bit. And you can see as it's flying around, it looks a little bit more interesting, and it gives the player something to interact with, something moving around within the world that we can aim for. I think at this point as well, the ship is not actually destroyable. I think it's just there, something that will fly around and add a bit of excitement to the level. And at this point, this was the end of the first day of the jam, so I figured it was time to go ahead and get some sleep and get some things together for the next day. So the first thing I did the next day was add some new models into the game. Most importantly, the ship of the player. So this is what the final ship of the player will actually look like in the game too. And it's got these cool little things on the end of the wings that open up depending on how fast you're moving and things like that, which was kind of a fun little thing that I wanted to add in. So that kind of took a while, took a little bit longer than I expected to, but I mean, that's what 3D modeling is. It takes a lot longer than you expect most of the time, I find. But it felt a little bit more real at this point. So once you have a kind of a more accurate player model and you've got all these cool trails coming out the back of it, it actually started to feel like something good. You can also notice that the jump gate at this point now has a texture on it, a weird kind of texture thing, and that's just something very simple I made with Shader Graph to create this kind of scrolling texture effect that would allow the jump gate to look a little bit more interesting, at least, to the player. So then it was time to add in another little threat, which is these mines here. So you can see if I fly into them, they explode and do some damage and take away some power from the ship. So it means you have to get more power to get to your jump gate destination. And along with creating these mines, you can see also that I created this nice explosion effect, which will appear when those mines explode, but also whenever your rockets, which you can right click to fire, whenever they get fired out, it will send the rockets, and when they hit anything, they'll explode into a nice little puff of explosion-y fun. So with mines added in, I really needed to improve how the enemies were working, because they were just flying around like crazy people in the what we had previously. So I added a very simple kind of bit of AI to it. It'll fly. If it gets within a certain range of the player, it'll fly towards them, and once it gets close enough to the player, it'll just keep going in a straight line. So in effect, they don't just try to run into the player the whole time, they kind of fly along beside the player, and then once they get to the other side of the asteroid field, they'll turn around and fly back across and see if they can encounter the player again. Not too complicated of an AI, but it works to add in some interest to our ships. And then I added a very simple 3D model to make the asteroids look a little bit better than just brown spheres. And then we ended up with these, as some people suggested on our Discord server, some nice space potatoes that I think looked a little bit better, but obviously they're not the most complicated things in the world. And from there, I wanted to move on to making the next main section that I had in the game. So those basic mechanics were all working now. The next major thing I wanted was this first-person perspective section where you go and collect the creature. This is where you start off the game. You collect the creature, run back over to your ship, get back inside, and fly away. And this is a very, very simple thing. So obviously you can see basically what I have there is the creature being picked up. So that's a very simple thing. That's literally just a creature. You walk into the area of it. Once you're in that area, you can left click and it just makes that creature disappear. And it makes a creature that's attached to the camera of the player just slide up into view with a very simple animation and makes it just appear there and kind of bounce around, which is very simple, an easy thing to do. I'm not actually collecting the real creature that's there. We're doing some video game magic. And then from there, I took that idea and just kind of made it look a little bit nicer here. So we can run over and grab this little guy. And then when we head back to the ship, it starts a very simple animation sequence. This is just one animation altogether of the ship lifting up off the ground and flying off into space. So this is a whole animation. There's nothing else going on here apart from just moving this ship in space. There's nothing complicated happening with any coding. And it stops. And then once it stops, it switches to a different ship model, and which is our main kind of ship character controller, because that ship that's on the planet doesn't have any coding attached to it that it can do. It's literally just an empty model. So all it does is fly up. Once it gets to the end of its animation, the two of them switch places and the original ship just disappears, and then you go into this flying section and you can fly around and do all the stuff you want to do. That pretty much took me up to the end of the second day. So on the start of the third day, I basically spent some time, again, working on models, the same as I had the previous day. And I also added some basic menus into the game. So we've got a very simple little intro sequence, and we can actually dive in and actually start showing the intro sequence here. So you jump in, we've got some nicer looking 3D models here. We run over, grab our little Primpy, then we run back over to our ship, dive in. At this point there's no sound in the game either. Sound didn't come until much later in the final day, but At this point, I was pretty happy with that whole intro sequence, and to be honest, I was pretty happy with how most of the game worked. I also added this very, very simple tutorial system. It's literally just a couple of boxes that pop up, and you can click through them as you go. You might have noticed there I was also loading up shots as I was clicking on them, because at this point that system wasn't quite working correctly. But from here, most of the last day was spent on pretty boring stuff. Mostly it was things like making the audio work. It was making those menus work. It was setting up the levels that you would do in the game. So from here, there's not really a lot visually to show about what happened with developing this game. It's kind of mostly very boring, behind the scenes kind of stuff. I don't want to just put a video up of me typing code randomly, which isn't the most exciting thing. But we can jump forward to the final version of the game with everything working correctly. And in this version, if I start the game, there's actually some audio playing once we get into stuff. So if I press the key here, you can hear some background kind of animal noises. We run over and grab our little friend. Unfortunately, I really wanted him to make some squeaky noises, but ran out of time for that. So we run over and get into our ship. We now have a nice launch sequence, which is probably my favorite thing out of this game, along with the ship control. I really enjoy the ship control. If it's something that people enjoy as well, I obviously might take a look at doing a tutorial for the ship control in the future. I think it's something that is a lot of fun to do, so we might take a look at doing that soon. But again, we have these tutorials. I can just skip through these for now because I actually know what's going on, surprisingly, as the developer. So all we have to do is just collect a few bits of these drops and shake it up to 80 relatively quick. It's not too complicated. We can do some cool barrel rolls, and then from here, if we follow this green cursor on the screen, there we go, we can fly over to this jump gate here. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how this game turned out. I didn't get in everything I wanted to do, because you never do with a game jam. There's just not enough time to get everything done that you would always want to do. But what is in here, I'm pretty happy with. There's 5 levels to play in the game, a good variety of them. There's mines that come in and distract you. If I get close to this guy, look, he's chasing after me. I can blow him up and get all his points. As you can see, I'm down to 19 power here now because I've let a few mines run into me. They kind of come out of nowhere sometimes, so again, that's another thing I wanted to add in, was some kind of indicator for when the mines are nearby, but unfortunately we didn't have enough time for that. But as I said, overall I'm pretty happy with how this game turned out. It is a lot of fun to just fly around. I did spend a good amount of time during the jam just flying around in the ship, just running around blowing up asteroids. So it was pretty calm and relaxing. It kind of makes me think it'd be fun to make a full game where all you do is fly around. I mean, but then essentially what you end up with then is just No Man's Sky. So who knows? Maybe that might be a little bit pointless. But this is The Last Primpy. It was a lot of fun to make, a lot of fun to see how other people were progressing during the jam as well. On our Discord server, everyone was sharing their progress of their own games as they went along through the Game Jam weekend, and overall it was just a lot of fun. So thanks for watching this video. I will be back soon with more tutorials in the very near future, but in the meantime, keep being awesome, keep making cool things, and keep sharing them here on the channel and on our Discord server and on Twitter @GamesPlusJames as well. So keep up the awesome work, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all very soon.